Look, at the moment, as far as monetary policy is concerned, I have nothing but positive words for what the central bank has done. We come in from a background of very high levels of instability as a result of loose money and uncontrolled growth in money supply. And the central bank has taken the last 1 year to mop up all that money. Interest rates are high, yes, but we have stabilized the exchange rate. We have pulled back from the brink of total economic collapse. Inflation is coming down. It's still at 20%, still very high, but it's coming down from the very high levels of a few years ago. We have built up reserves to over $40 billion. The economy has grown first quarter by more than 3%, second quarter by more than 4%, and this is the first time in a long time that this economy has been growing faster than the population. For many years, population growth has exceeded GDP growth, and this in a time when oil price has been moderate. So in terms of monetary policy and stability, I have nothing but commendation for the government. On the fiscal side, we have had an improvement in revenue to GDP ratios, an improvement in debt service ratios, a contraction in the deficit, and these are positive steps. But we still have a long way to go. I mean, I would like to see a better look at fiscal expenditure. We're still spending too much money on government, on the cost of governance, too many political appointees, too many officers. We still have to look at the quality of spending, with value for money, the processes for spending, because if we, and the reason is that if we do not improve the quality of spending and put a rein on spending, we're going to continue borrowing. So after saving money from these expensive subsidies, after building up the government balance sheet, you go and spend it and then you have to borrow again. So we still have some steps to go on the fiscal side, but the first thing was to fix revenue, and I think with the tax reforms and with what we've seen so far, the fiscal side is on its way. The structural reforms take longer. We talk about the power sector. I would like to see that we put a stop to the mass importation of food. I know it was driven by a desire to bring down food prices, but it is in the end very counterproductive to domestic production and domestic producer prices. So hopefully we will get to a point where we go back on track with the reforms in the agricultural sector, fixing that cultural value chain, and relying on domestic production to feed the nation. But all in all, I think I would say 70 to 80% of what the government has done and the direction it is on, I support. I do have some reservations about one or two things like the importation of food and the quality of expenditure and the nature of overheads. But I think we're on the right path, and we've got to keep working to get to the destination. But we're coming from a bad place, and we've come very far in the right direction.
Now, there have been talks about diversification of our economy, and you've also preferred solutions whilst you were at the topmost level and even afterwards, you know, when giving public speeches. And you're saying that we're on the right trajectory when it comes to our fiscal policies and direction for our economy. But to diversify Nigeria away from oil, what exactly does the country stand to, you know, to tackle in doing that? Would it be insecurity? Would it be, you know, boosting confidence, investor confidence? What would it be to make Nigeria diversify properly or in depth?
But Nigeria has been away from oil for a long time. I mean, it's a myth. Oil is less than 10% of GDP, maybe less than 5% today. Nigeria is not an oil-dependent country. Government revenues are driven by oil prices, and we've got to diversify our exports, and I think we're now having non-oil exports increase because of the exchange rate situation, and we're getting more competitive. We've got to work on the quality of exports and access to markets. If we want to sell Nigerian goods abroad, we've got to make sure they meet the specifications of the consumer, and that requires regulation, it requires controls, it requires certification, and that work needs to be done. But in terms of the GDP, services, financial services, telecommunication services, information technology, education and healthcare, those sectors have grown significantly in the last few decades. So there has been significant diversification of production away from oil. And what we need to do is diversify sources of government revenue and reduce the correlation between oil and non-oil revenue. Because we often forget that when oil revenue goes up, we also tend to import more and we have import duties. And therefore, when oil prices go down, you have a reverse. So reduce that correlation, have more sources with diversifying the tax base, with improving, with widening the tax net, with relying more on domestic income and production, you reduce those vulnerabilities.
Now, as we're talking about reducing vulnerabilities, now we've seen the shock effect of the removal of petrol subsidy up until today, and many of us or Nigerians are still very skeptical or unsure whether or not that decision was made too hastily or all at once. In your fair assessment of the implications of removing the fuel subsidy, would you say that that Nigeria has done, or the government have done so far so well, so good when it comes to mitigating the impact on the vulnerable population of Nigeria?
You know, there's a kind of poetic justice here. When I was governor of Central Bank in 2011, we advised the president to remove fuel subsidies. Subsidies were removed, and some people went on demonstration, Occupy Nigeria, opposed it, and now they're in government and they've had to do it because that is the reality. Those subsidies needed to go. What the president did was absolutely necessary. And my experience with these things is, if you say you're going to remove subsidies gradually in this country, the vested interests and those who have profited from subsidy would make it difficult for you to complete it. Even with the President Jonathan, when we started, the negotiations were with Labour.
So I will listen to him. Let us equally look at this from the angle of the politics at play in Kano State. Because as we speak, it's on record that currently Kano is having two emirs. One backed by the state government, that is Muhammad Sanusi himself, of course, the man in the eye of the storm, the former central bank governor. And the second has to do with the Baru, of course, the son of the immediate past emir of Kano State. We understand that in Kano State, we have two ruling houses, the Sanusi dynasty and the Baru dynasty. It was the Baru dynasty that finished their last time in office before Sanusi stepped in. But as we have it, the policy setting, I had a situation where the former governor of the state, of course, who is the immediate past national chairman of APC, talking about Ganduje, in his time as governor, removed or rather dethroned Sanusi as the emir of Kano. And as if that was not enough, he broke the emirates into 5 different emirates. But as we have it, the Kwankwaso, who leads, of course, a former governor of the state as well, who leads Kwankwaso movement, succeeded in having the state through New Nigerian People's Party. And as we have it, the governor, Abba Yusuf, who is loyal to Sanusi, is the current governor. He has since collapsed all the emirates into one and reinstated Sanusi as the emir of Kano. But that did not stop Baru from parading himself as the emir of Kano, because we have still had conflicting court judgments. On one hand, we have seen courts restating Sanusi and authenticating the Sanusi as the emir of Kano. We have only seen courts disagreeing with that position, and as we have it, some judgment already back the man Baru himself. But I think all the cases will be consolidated in a court of higher jurisdiction, perhaps Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, that will ultimately give a judgment that will streamline and decide who is the authentic emir of Kano. But before then, we have a situation where there is a standstill in Kano State, a situation that have led to 2 emirs in Kano State. Talking about the Sanusi himself, of course, the man that carries the burden of economic knowledge, of course, the man that educates the North about the direction to go when it comes to government that have the right thinking in terms of economy, and the man Baru himself. Currently, the man Baru is being backed by federal forces, still staying in Kano as emir. But on the other hand, we have the Sanusi, who has gotten the nod of the state government. But currently, thanks for the effort of federal government, Otherwise, the man Baharo would have been shown the way out of that office. But currently, two of them hold sway in different palaces, exercising their responsibilities as the Emir of Kano. But the question here is, the man, Ganduje, is no longer in the saddle in terms of his political position initially, though he was given another position. But we understand that the influence he wielded as APC national chairman was higher than what he now wield in his new appointment. But the question now is, will the federal government eventually subpedal on Baharo and throw their weight on the man Sanusi subsequently? I think the time will determine that. But before then, let us equally look at this issue from the angle that could it be because of the stand of federal government about the emirship tussle in Kano State? Could that be the reason is Sanusi himself, who initially made it clear that he was not interested in speaking about Tinubu'S policies because he was not ready to help the government? Because you know that when he speaks, the people will listen and the people will eventually perhaps throw their weight and support behind the government of Tinubu. Could that be the reason he have now decided to come out and speaking in support of the government? Because once he have said that he support Tinubu's economic policies 80%, definitely he got to show that his subjects, his proponents, those who look up to him, like I said earlier on, that he's an opinion leader, he's of course a major stakeholder in the northern part of the country. Once he speaks, he got to show that people are bound to listen and people are bound to support and take his word for what it is. Because certainly a good number of people in the north, this his statement has multiplier effects. A good number of people in the north will not see Tinubu's economic policies that he has been struggling to market to the north as a policy in the right direction. Hence, it now come from the horse's mouth, the man who should know better. But the question is, will this now make him endear him into the heart of the president himself? Talking about Senator Amebola Tinubu, who is seen or who is perceived to be against his emirship position, seeing that federal government is currently backing Baharo to sustain his emirship in Kano State. Now, I think all of this shall be finally decided when the case is settled in the courts. But another issue is, just as a Jonathan alleged in the past, that the Nigerian judiciary pretend to be sleeping. He was actually alluding to the fact that judgment in the Nigerian judiciary is often being manipulated. But the question now is, will they have fair judgment that will actually determine who will occupy that position? Will the government try to influence the judgment? This is another angle to the arguments. But I think one thing is certain, that whether we like it or not, this Sanusi's position have come out to deplete the popularity of Atiku, El-Rufai, Malami, Babachilawa, all of them in the north. Because they will now have a Herculean task, an obvious task, telling people in the north that Tinubu policies is not in the right direction. Hence, they have seen an opinion leader, a man that people respect, coming out clearly to say that the man's policy, he back it 80%, and that it's already in the result, beyond the understanding of the common man on the streets. So what does it mean for the future of political class in the north ahead of 2027, who are pushing to ensure that the man Tinubu is not returned to Asurok come 2027? But as you have it, we understand that Atiku have made it very clear that the only ground he will not contest is if a younger candidate perhaps defeats him in ADC primary. And since then, we have seen a former senator from Kaduna State talking about Shehu Sani, who have come out clearly to say that it will even take the head of the camel to pass through the eye of the needle for an Atiku to lose in party primary, because Atiku is perhaps seen as a master of the game when it comes to party primary. So it's as good as saying that Atiku will certainly contest, that he will ultimately not step down for anyone. But another angle is, there are speculation out there that a Jonathan camp is reaching out to Atiku, reaching out to P2B to extract commitment from them to enable him to throw his hat into the ring. But it's yet to be understood whether a Jonathan will eventually contest. But as we have it, those who are close to Jonathan have come out clearly to explain that a Jonathan will certainly contest the election. We have a situation where his cousins have come out to clarify that. Jerry Ghana have come out to clarify that. Even Bala Mohammed have come out to clarify that. But the question is, there's another school of thought that say that if a Jonathan eventually contests, and perhaps Atiku is on the ballot, that a Jonathan is being used to deplete the vote and chance of the South getting at Asurokon 2027. That will now give an Atiku upper hand to get elected in 2027. Another school of thought is even questioning the camp of Tinubu in trying to fly the Southern card. According to them, that Tinubu was in the vanguard of those who truncated a Jonathan second term ambition in 2015. That now that Tinubu is not justified to start talking about a Santa turn. But in all of this, I know it's politics is at play. Let us wait and see how time we decide what actually happened. But what we know is that the man Tinubu is definitely going to contest, is qualified to contest. Atiku is want to contest, is qualified to contest, even though I canvass certain candidacy because I believe that that tacit agreement must be respected. The man will likely contest, and a Jonathan will likely contest. But let us allow time to determine what actually will happen. But meanwhile, I must say very big thank you. This is Satellite Media. I am Mr. Matthew.